Kazuya is a weak bum who becomes depressed after his mom dies. However, everything changes when his mom's scarf turns into a beautiful magic girl who will crack his enemies by day and let him crack her by night. It all begins when Kazuya has a strange dream about a spirit girl who feels oddly familiar, walking away from him. As he tries to stop her, he wakes up and accidentally grabs the tangerine-sized plots of his classmate, Chisato, causing her to smack him on the head. Shortly afterwards, Kazuya heads to the roof to clear his head, and he remembers that the girl from his dream was wearing his late mother's obi, so he brings it out and comforts himself by sniffing it, because his mom's cherry blossom scent is all he remembers of her. While walking back, he sees a strange wig on the ground, and he tries to avoid it, but the wig suddenly grabs him and launches him over the fence. While in the air, Kazuya concludes that he's dead, but his mom's obi suddenly explodes out of his bag and cushions his landing. The obi then transforms into a spirit girl named Kiriha, who tells Kazuya that it's been a while since they last met, but Kazuya says he has no idea who she is, so she sends him flying with a Tanjiro special. Just then, a girl arrives at the scene, wearing the same wig and tries to attack him again, but Kiriha saves him with obi attacks and pulls Kazuya to herself while claiming that Kazuya is now her sugar boy since she saved him twice. As the evil spirit moves in to attack Kazuya, he starts panicking, but Kiriha promises to save him if he agrees to serve her, so he agrees. Kiriha then throws him aside, and as the hair demon attacks, she wraps its hair in obi and uses another roll of obi to punch it in the gut before slamming it on the ground. Seeing this, Kazuya worries that the girl could die, but Kiriha informs him that spirits don't die easily, and the hair spirit proves her right by returning to her feet. The evil spirit then launches a barrage of sharp hair strikes at Kiriha, but Kiriha moonwalks as smoothly as Michael Jackson to evade them before jabbing the spirit and slamming it on the ground again. Despite this, the wig spirit attacks again with hair spikes, and Kiriha creates a shield with her obi to block the attack. However, one of the hair spikes slips through and stabs Kazuya in the arm, so Kiriha gets enraged and launches a powerful drill attack with her obi, aiming to destroy both the spirit and the girl. However, Kazuya begs her not to harm the girl, so Kiriha adjusts her attack so that it only stabs the evil spirit and frees the girl. Soon after, Kazuya is checking on the unconscious girl, and he asks Kiriha why she attacked him. She explains that the girl has feelings for him, so when the wig attacked her, it intensified the feelings to an abnormal degree, turning it into an evil spirit called an Amasogi. Hearing this, Kazuya is happy that a girl actually fell for him despite his lack of riz, but Kiriha gives him the shock of his life by informing him that it's actually a boy. Hours later, Kazuya lies on his bed, wondering who Kiriha really is, and he realizes that he can no longer find his mom's obi ever since she has appeared. He eventually falls asleep, but ends up having a strange dream, which makes him jump out of bed. However, when he lifts the sheets, he sees Kiriha lying beside him, causing him to freak out. His sister, Kasume, hears the noise from downstairs and thinks that Diddy has invaded her brother's back door, so she rushes to his room with a frying pan. But Kazuya ties Kiriha up like a sausage roll and hides her behind his bed. When Kasumi arrives, she's surprised that everything looks normal despite the loud noises. After she leaves, Kiriha punishes Kazuya for disrespecting her, after which she introduces herself as a spirit born from his mom's obi. She then asks him to call her master, and Kazuya argues that he should be the master since it's his obi, but she gives him a terrifying stare, which makes him finally fold. For his first task, she tells him to bring her some pudding, so he goes to the convenience store to get her some. As she enjoys the pudding, Kazuya joins his sister downstairs for dinner, but she starts hearing noises from his room, which makes her suspicious, so Kazuya lies that it's just the television. When Kazuya returns to his room, he doesn't see Kiriha around, and he thinks that she's left. However, when he enters the bathroom, he sees her having a bath with no plot covers on, so he starts imagining all the brutal ways she could punish him. However, she shockingly tells him to wash her back because he's now her servant, and he reluctantly agrees to do it. After that, she offers to help scrub his back, claiming that they used to do it all the time. Even though Kazuya doesn't remember, he eventually folds, and as she scrubs his back, he notices that it actually feels familiar. However, Kiriha starts teasing him by playing with his joystick, causing him to freak out. Afterwards, They lay beside each other on the bed, and as Kiriha sleeps, Kazuya notices that everything feels natural with her because her familiar scent brings him comfort. But she suddenly grabs him tightly, making him freak out once again. The next morning, Kiriha wakes up and sees that Kazuya is still sleeping, so she blows air into his ears to wake him up. However, Kazuya thinks it's his sister since his brain hasn't booted, and he sleep talks about how a weird spirit is pestering him, so Kiriha angrily crushes his man jewels with her feet. Hours later, Kazuya runs through the school hallway as fast as he can to make it to class on time, but when he arrives, the teacher tells him that he's already late by a long shot. After class, Chisato bonks Kazuya in the head repeatedly while scolding him for being late, but Kazuya doesn't say anything to defend himself because he knows it's all Kiriha's fault. Earlier that morning, Kazuya was surprised that he woke up past 8 because he had set his alarm clock for 6, but Kiriha informed him that she destroyed the alarm clock when it rang since she considered it a nuisance. He then tried to rush to school but stopped when he saw that Kiriha was following him, and she explained that she didn't want to be apart from him because she'd always been with him, and he's now her servant. However, Kazuya realized that taking her to school would only make people see him as a bigger degenerate, so he begged her to transform into her obi form, and once she did, he tied her up in a box and ran to school. Back in the present, Kazuya is having lunch with his two friends, Shiru and Osamu, and Shiru tells them about a rumor which says that ghosts appear after school, but Osamu says it's cap, so he explains that multiple eyewitnesses claim to have seen a weird, hairy creature. Hearing this, Kazuya realizes that they're talking about the hair Amasogi he fought with Kiriha. But Shiru starts yapping about his degenerate fantasies until Chisato smacks all of them in the head. While scolding them, she mentions that they should be double-checking their reports that are due in the 5th period, and that's when Kazuya's 2 brain cells finally remember that he has homework. So he begs Osamu to let him copy. However, Chisato appears behind him like a cursed spirit and drags him away to make him do his homework by himself. In the library, Kazuya realizes that he's too dumb to finish the homework on time, so he begs Chisato to let him copy, but she refuses and points out that one of his answers is wrong. He finally agrees to do it himself, so she smiles, and when he asks why she's smiling, she says she remembered how she used to tutor him when they were still ugly midgets. Hearing this, Kazuya thanks her for always helping him out since he's such a doofus, and as he continues his homework, she asks if she can visit him to teach him like they used to. This makes Kazuya happy, but when he remembers that Kiriha is now staying with him, he tells her it's not a good time, so she apologizes for being meddlesome. When he's done with the homework, he heads over to the shelf to return the book, and Chisato tries to return to class, but when she grabs the door, she notices that it's locked. Meanwhile, Kiriha suddenly appears in front of Kazuya, so he screams out loud, and the noise alerts Chisato, so he heads over to check on him, only to see his face looking like a used punching bag. When he asks why she didn't return to class, she tells him that the door wouldn't open, so he tries to help her open it, but it still doesn't budge, and since every other exit has been cut off, he concludes that they're trapped in there. Kazuya then tries to break open the door with some cleaning tools, but they all shatter on impact, so Kiriha starts trolling him for being worthless without her. However, when he notices that Chisato can see her, he drags Kiriha to the bookshelves, where he scolds her for not hiding as he had asked her to, but she beats the piss out of him for forgetting his place. She then informs him that Tsukumogami is behind their current situation, and the idiot claims that it's just like her, so she pummels him once again before explaining to him that Tsukumogami fall under 2 categories. Some, like herself, arise from objects or tools after many years, and are known as Tsugumomo, but there are some, like the hair spirit they fought the previous day, that arise quickly from human emotions called Amasogi. Kiriha then claims that Chisato would be able to help them get out of this situation, so they meet up with her, and she introduces herself to Kiriha. As Kiriha tries to reveal her identity, Kazuya covers her mouth and reminds her that they need to stay secret, so she lies that she's Kazuya's cousin who likes occult things. After getting Chisato up to speed with the info about Amasogi, Kiriha then presents a hair ornament as the solution to their problem, and explains that they can use it to find the Amasogi responsible and resolve the issue after finding out the wish that summoned it. They start searching around the library, and the hair ornament starts moving when Chisato gets close to a book, so she tells Kiriha she's found the Amasogi. However, Kazuya also arrives with a book which the tracker reacts to, and they notice that all books in the library are making the hair ornament react. So Kiriha ditches the Sherlock Holmes gimmick and creates 2 drills with her obi to smash the door open. As she drills the door, the entire room suddenly cracks open and teleports them to a spirit realm where a bunch of books start floating. Seeing this, Kiriha realizes that the Amasugi is the entire library, and as the books move behind to attack, she evades their blows and uses a hammer made from obi to swat a block of books away. However, the books combine into a Power Rangers Megazord and start charging towards them, so they run away, and Kiriha notices that the books are only targeting her. They soon arrive at a spot where they run out of breath, but just when they start to feel safe, the book Gundam reappears and spams attacks at Kiriha, but Kiriha blocks them. However, a book flies towards Chisato, but the surrounding books form a wall which protects her. So Kiriha holds the monsters back while telling Kazuya to remember his earlier conversation with Chisato. He informs her that he refused Chisato's offer to come to his house, so Kiriha reveals that she's the one hosting the Amasogi and asks him to fulfill her desire. Hearing this, Kazuya holds Chisato while telling her to come tutor him at his house, and once she agrees, they're transported back to the normal library, so Kazuya thanks Kiriha for her help. The next day, Chisato arrives at Kazuya's home and apologizes for being the cause of the drama the previous day, but Kiriha explains that the real cause is Malicens, which are entities that react to people's will that can be used to reshape the world. However, she claims that it's rare for Malicen to accumulate in one area to create such a powerful Amasogi, and she concludes that it's the local god of the area, Kukure, that's at fault. Meanwhile, Shiru is walking on the street, but a lady with enormous milk factories named Kokuyu suddenly arrives and asks if he's Kazuya. When he confirms that he isn't, she turns to leave, but Bro isn't willing to pass up a chance to motorboat her fun bags, so he calls her back and tells her that he's Kazuya's friend. Hearing this, she asks him to take him to Kazuya, and he agrees but proposes that she do something for him in return. Sometime earlier, someone told Kiriha that their situation would become dire if Kazuya woke up, and she decided to seal away the excess spiritual energy along with his memories of the incident that put him in that unconscious state. Kiriha immediately agreed, but the lady informed her that Kazuya would forget all about her and lose his power, and she could go back to being just a regular obi, which is the equivalent of death for its Tsukumagami. Despite this, she agreed to go along with the process. In the present, Kazuya says goodbye to his dad and heads to school, where Shiru suddenly drop-kicks him in the back and yells at him for causing him trouble. Earlier, Shiru took Kokuyu to McDonald's, and she tried to leave to complete her mission of finding Kazuya, but he convinced her to stay by offering to treat her to a meal. While staring at the menu, the foolish Gunner realized that Kokuyu had a few screws loose in the head, but that didn't discourage him, since he was willing to risk it all for the gigantic melons she's packing. He asked her to order whatever she wanted, so when the maid arrived, she ordered an entire army's worth of food, and everyone watched in shock as she devoured all the food like a hungry titan. Once she finished, the owner raised her hand like she won the world championship, and the maid even handed her a complimentary meal to take home. After she left, Shiru tried to play it cool and walk after her, but the owners dragged the moron back and forced him to pay. In the present, Shiru whines to Kazuya that he spent his entire life savings paying for Kokuyu's meal, and he now owes Osamu as well, but Osamu assures him that he can repay his debt by receiving backshots from his entire family, so Shiru thanks him.
You are gay.
Meanwhile, Kokuyu presents Kukure with some of the meals she got from the restaurant, but Kukure yells at her for slacking off during a mission, so she apologizes. Kokuyu then brings up the fact that their shrine is in a pitiful state because Kukure is a forgettable god, but this pisses Kukure off, so she sends Kokuyu to bring Kazuya and leave Kiriha behind. During the break period, Shiru challenges Kazuya to an arm wrestling match for the right to crack his sister, but before they can begin, all the students around start freaking out because their lunches have disappeared. Seeing this, Kazuya accuses Kiriha of eating their food, but she adjusts his brain with a brutal punch, so he apologizes. Chisato suggests that it could be an Amasogi, but Kazuya dismisses that idea and guesses that it's a thief instead, so Kiriha asks how a human could eat so many lunches at once. Just then, Kokuyu walks into the room, nonchalantly snacking on all the food she stole, but Shiro angrily asks her to let him play with her milk jugs as payment for what she did to him, so she agrees to let him rub them. As the idiot charges ahead to claim his succulent prize, Chisato knocks him out with her weapon before he can reach her, so Kokuyu tells Kazuya to come with her. However, Kiriha appears and declares that she won't let her take her servant, but Kokuyu calls her a washcloth girl while telling her to leave. This makes Kiriha so angry that she pulls out her obi to fight her, but Kazuya holds her back and tells her to resolve things the peaceful way, so Kiriha asks to settle things through arm wrestling instead. Shortly after, everyone is gathered on the roof for the arm wrestling match, and Kazuya explains that it would be a single-round competition, where if Kiriha wins, she'll follow them to the shrine, but she'll remain at school if she loses. However, Kiriha asks Kazuya to remove the desk since it's in her way, and after he does, Kiriha approaches Kokuyu and tells her that she'll take her to meet Kukuri if she wins, and Kokuyu agrees. Instead of regular arm wrestling, the two Giga Chicks start throwing powerful jabs at each other like Floyd Mayweather and Mike Tyson, and Kokuyu eventually drags Kiriha down, but when she tries to deliver the finishing blow, Kiriha grabs her thumb and slams her to the ground with John Cena's finishing move, making all the students cheer. Suddenly, a teacher arrives and scolds everyone for playing around when it's way past lunchtime, and Kazuya tries to explain that they're just playing arm wrestling, but they see that the girls are already long gone. After school, Kokuyu takes Kazuya and the girls to the Hakusan shrine, where Kukure arrives to greet them, wearing a dazzling Japanese outfit and a mask. Kokuyu introduces Kukuri as the great incarnation of Hakusan, Muri, and Kazuya is impressed by her aura, but Kiriha trolls her for wearing a mask to look cool. Kukuri asks Kokuyu why she disobeyed her order to leave the washcloth girl behind, so she explained that she lost a game of arm wrestling against her, and Kiriha starts bickering with Kukuri over the number of arm wrestling matches they've won against each other until Kazuya tells them to stop. Kiriha then asks Kukuri if the seal has broken since there have been so many irregular occurrences recently, but Kukuri explains that it hasn't broken, and it's only been weakened. Hearing this, Kiriha asks her to reapply the seal, but Kukuri says she can't do that and asks Kazuya to be a malison cleanser. However, Kiriha refuses and asks her to send her maids instead, so Kukuri explains to Kazuya that strange things are happening around him because he's the beacon that attracts malison, making him a danger to everyone around him. Kiriha tells him that she is only lying to make him do her bidding, and she tries to run away with him, but Kukuri stops them with a barrier and pulls out a mask to engage in combat while Kokuyu flies away with Chisato. She then asks Kazuya if he'll accept the role of a malison cleanser, but Kiriha refuses on his behalf, so Kukuri awakens her powers as the water goddess. As she blasts water balls at them, Kiriha blocks with an obi shield, so she shatters the shield with a water spear and starts spamming water spears at them, forcing Kiriha to use her obi as wings to fly Kazuya away. However, she collides with a barrier in the air, so she charges in and tries to land a combo attack on Kukuri, but Kukuri evades her attacks and knocks her down with water blasts. As Kiriha struggles back to her feet, Kazuya begs her to stop, claiming that he'd do what Kukuri wants, but Kiriha tells him to stay behind her. Kukuri then casts an overpowered water spell called Water Impact, which blasts them from above. Seeing this, Chisato fears that they're dead, but Kiriha manages to protect herself and Kazuya using a cocoon made of obi, and she boasts that it's a defense move as strong as Gojo's Infinity called Shelter Formation. However, the move takes such a heavy toll on her that she shrinks into chibi form, and Kukuri asks her to reconsider since she won't be able to take another water impact blast in her current state. But Kiriha refuses and tells Kazuya to only do what Kukuri wants if she dies. Concerned, Kazuya offers to save her life by becoming a malison cleanser as Kukuri asks, but Kiriha refuses, so he asks her why she's so against it, and she declares that it's her reason for being there. As Kiriha casts a defense spell, Kukuri unleashes another water impact blast, but this time, Kiriha passes out and the water breaks through her shield. In the dream world, Kazuya sees a cheerful lady who starts making fun of Kiriha and Kukuri like they're her besties, and he tries to walk away since he doesn't have time, but she holds him back and asks him to save Kiriha. This confuses him, so she explains that she wants him to free Kiriha from the old agreement, which she's still bound by. When he asks what he could do, she says he has to get stronger so he'd be the one protecting her, instead of the other way around, and explains that he could awaken his abilities by learning an ultimate attack and her true name. As the lady walks away, Kazuya asks what Kiriha's real name is, but she smiles while telling him that he should already know it and wishes him good luck. When Kazuya wakes up, he sees Kiriha giving him mouth-to-mouth, and when they jump to the surface, Kiriha tries to attack Kukuri again, but he holds her back and tells her to turn back into an obi so he can use her since she can't fight on her own anymore. Kiriha angrily reminds him that she's his master, but Kazuya pulls an Uno reverse by calling her original name, Aya Sakura, while commanding her to return to her original form, and this makes her turn back into an obi. As Kukure stares in shock, Kiriha starts scolding Kazuya for making things so that he'd be the one fighting instead. But Kazuya smiles and tells her that he's eager to fight alongside her. When she asks if he has a plan, he confirms that he does, so she opens up into her battle formation. Seeing this, Kukuri fires a barrage of water spells at them, and Kazuya tries to block with an obi shield, but his shield ends up being deformed, so he jumps away to avoid the attack. As Kiriha scolds him, Kukuri sends another powerful attack called Water Wheel, and this time, Kazuya creates a perfect obi shield, which blocks the attack, causing Kiriha to praise him. However, Kukure goes all out and summons a giant snake made of water, but Kazuya remembers the lady from his dreams, telling him what to do in this situation, so he creates an obi shield. Kiriha scolds him, thinking he's just pulled a low IQ move, but when the water snake attacks, Kazuya activates a move called Watershed, which bends the shield into a sharp angle, causing the snake to split in half. He then launches himself into the air using the obi and charges in with a drill attack, and Kukuri creates a water wall to block, but he reinforces the drill with a stronger weave, enabling it to shatter Kukuri's shield. However, Kukuri holds Kiriha hostage and threatens to skewer her if he doesn't surrender, so Kazuya accepts the duty of becoming a Malison cleanser, and she finally lets Kiriha go. As he checks on Kiriha, Kokoyu returns with Chisato, and Kukure tries to give a bold speech as his new leader, but her mask suddenly snaps open, revealing her true form as a green-haired midget.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man.
She gets so embarrassed by her washboard body that she curls up to cover herself, and Kiriha makes fun of her for depending on a mask to have aura and plots. As she tries to grab the mask, Kiriha snatches it and repays her for all her cruel treatment by sticking pebbles inside her tiny cookie. After they've calmed down, Kukuri explains to Kiriha that she never intended to unalive Kazuya, and her big villain act was all a ruse to get Kazuya to command Kiriha, so she can use him for missions. She also mentions that Kiriha will now have to mind orders now that Kazuya has gained control of her, but this annoys Kiriha, so she grabs the water brain and spins around with her like a Beyblade before tossing her on the wall. On the way back, Kazuya and Kiriha apologize to Chisato for all the trouble while sending her off, and as Kazuya piggybacks Kiriha home, he promises her that he'll do his best as a Malison cleanser. At the shrine, Kokuyu asks Kukure if what they did is for the best, and she says they have to believe in Kazuya before bringing up the fact that their home is now in shambles. Later that evening, Kazuya expresses his worries about Kiriha's current mini-form, but she assures him that she won't remain, that she'll return to normal after getting some rest. He tries to check her for injuries, but she flips the script by giving him a clear view of her atom-sized plots. While in the bath together, Kazuya helps Kiriha wash her hair, and she tells him that his hand feels much bigger now. As Kiriha relaxes in the tub, she remembers the drilling technique Kazuya used to bypass Kukuri's shield and realizes that it's the technique of her former master, Kanaka. Several years ago, Kanaka held a newborn Kazuya in her arms and asked Kiriha to take care of him if anything ever happened to her, and Kiriha promised to take care of him, so she thanked her. Back in the present, Kiriha suddenly passes out in the pool, so Kazuya takes her to the bed to get some rest. He then meets up with Kasume and asks her to borrow some of her old clothes because he needs them for Kukure, but she thinks her brother is slowly turning into a PDF file, so she starts goofing off until she sees that her food is burning. Shortly after, Kazuya asks Chisato for some old clothes over the phone, and she agrees to lend him some but says she can't get them to him immediately, so he makes one final call. Minutes later, Osamu meets him outside and hands him the goods, so he takes them to Kiriha in his room along with some pudding. When he hands her the clothes, she tries them on, but realizes that they're all weird clothes from Angela White's personal collection, so she punches him while calling him a creep. He explains that he got them from Osamu, but she still teases him by asking which of the spicy outfits he'd love her to wear for him. The next morning, Kiriha informs Kazuya that he'll need to start training that day because a Malison cleanser is meant to be a man of fortitude, but Kazuya complains that he's tired from all the gooning he did the previous night. Hearing this, Kiriha tries to beat him senseless with her obi, but nothing comes out, so she explains that she's been able to project herself ever since her battle with Kukure, and she's worried that she won't be able to aid him if an Amisogi appears once again. However, she decides that she'll train him in the arts of wielding an obi despite her own weakness until he's become strong enough to challenge Goku. During the training, Kazuya gasps for air like a dehydrated catfish after running a few meters, and he complains that the training is too much for an indoors dude like himself. But Kiriha tells him to man up. After another round of running, Kazuya is even more exhausted, but Kiriha tells him that he'll never be a Malison cleanser with his low stamina and transforms into her obi form, so they can begin the next stage of their training. She then asks him to demonstrate the techniques he used during the fight against Kukure, starting with the shield, but he fumbles miserably, so she instructs him to use 2 obi and put some willpower into it. But the dimwit still doesn't understand what she means. Since Kazuya proved to be worthless, Kiriha ends the training for the day, and they return home. While in the bath together, Kiriha asks Kazuya why Tsugumomo can transform into human form, but the moron guesses wrongly, saying that it's to crack each other in secret. So she crushes his baby elephant as punishment. As he cries in pain, she explains that Tsugumomo are human tools whose powers are limited if they don't have a wielder, which means that a human form lets them operate independently without the owner around. However, she informs him that their human form has its limitations and suddenly hugs him tightly while asking him to describe her body. Kazuya says he's soft and warm, so she explains that in human form, the Tsugumomo have human organs, which means that they'd die from a fatal injury that could unalive a human. Similarly, Kiriha would die if she were damaged beyond repair as an obi, and when Kazuya asks for the difference, she says she can recover from minor cuts and tears in her obi form. While lying in the tub together, Kiriha states that Tsukumogami can't exist without humans because their power comes from their bonds with their owner, and she decides to train him in the obi techniques he can master at the moment. At the shrine, Kokuyu informs Kukuri that she couldn't get any money because people are losing faith in the divine, but the temple workers complain that they can't fix the temple without money, so she charms them with puppy dog eyes until they run away. Kukuri is still ticked off that her workers abandon her, so Kokuyu tells her that they need to manage the state of the temple as it is. In Kazuya's room, he does a weave of the obi shield with paper, but Kiriha kicks him in the face while yelling at him for making it sloppy. After showing him how it's done, she asks him to try again, but bro is too exhausted. At the shrine, Kukuri and Kokuyu are trying to hold their building together to avoid the rain, but the structure falls apart again, and Kiriha's brick game shatters at the same time, making her realize that her biggest op is currently suffering. While under heavy rain, Kokori cries about her fallen shrine and asks where they'll live, but Kokuyu tells her not to worry because she has somewhere in mind. The next morning, Kiriha is beating the piss out of Kazuya during training while the others watch, and Kukuri asks what she's doing. So she explains that she's training his sense of range because she wants him to grasp how far the obi will reach. However, when she tosses the stuffed bag at him, it doesn't reach him, so she kicks him in the face for being too far. Seeing this, Kukuri tells her that there's no point in training in the basics, since he's already used an overpowered attack against her. But Kiriha explains that it was just a fluke, since he can't even pull a rock with obi at the moment. Shortly after, they all visit Kukuri's new shrine together, and Kiriha laughs at the fact that it's a playground. So Kukure explains that it's a safe spot, since there are no natural disasters coming to that area. The next day, Kazuya knocks on the door to the student council room, wondering why he was summoned, and when he enters, the student council president introduces himself as Taka while claiming that it's been a while since they've seen each other. However, Kazuya says he doesn't recognize him, so Taka reshapes his hair into a feminine form, making Kazuya realize that he's the one he saved from the wig spirit a few days ago. When Kiriha appears, Taka explains to them that a group of gamers have taken over the social studies room, and the representative he sent to solve the matter came back crying that he saw a monster, which is why he wants them to check it out. On the way, they run into Osamu, and Kiriha introduces herself as Kazuya's master, so Osamu glazes Kazuya for being a Japanese Johnny Sins. However, Taka starts freaking out over the fact that the spot where the social studies club room used to be is now an empty wall, so Kiriha uses her tracking ornament, and it reacts to the wall. Kiriha decides that they should retreat for the meantime, since it's too much for them to handle, but they run into a dead end where the stairway used to be. Just then, a creepy student named Nakajima tries to recruit them to the gamers club, but Taka refuses, so he uses a drawing to summon a minotaur, which starts attacking them. They try to run away but run into another dead end, so they run into the science room. However, they end up falling into Nakajima's trap, and as the minotaur rams the wall, Kazuya realizes that the Amasogi is the book Nakajima is drawing in, and the monster is a drawing which can be erased. The minotaur breaks in, but Osamu and Taka splash it with water, and Kazuya joins in by spraying some fire extinguisher, which erases its arm, allowing them to escape. Kazuya then erases the wall blocking the exit, but they run into another wall, and Nakajima shows up with the minotaur again, so Taka tells them to escape without him since he's the target. However, Kazuya refuses and evades the minotaur's attacks before snatching the fire extinguisher and erasing the monster once and for all. Shortly after, Kazuya explains everything about Amasogi to Osamu, and Kiriha tells Nakajima to end it himself, so he destroys the book. As Taka tries to apprehend Nakajima, he suddenly uses a piece of paper he was hiding to summon the minotaur again. But Osamu reveals that he's with the real sketchbook, because the one that was destroyed was a fake. Osamu then uses the book to summon a dragon, and the dragon roasts Nakajima's minotaur to ashes. The next day, Kazuya and Kiriha watch from their hiding spot as a chopped loser confesses his feelings to Chisato, but she rejects him and explains that she already likes someone else, which shocks Kazuya. After school, the three of them are chilling at Kazuya's place, and Kazuya asks Chisato about the guy she likes, but she refuses to tell him. Kiriha starts searching Chisato's bag for some pudding, but she ends up finding a weird Labubu doll, which she and Kazuya haven't seen before, and Chisato tells them that it's nothing. Meanwhile, the ugly loser whom Chisato rejected is in his room, plotting to expose Chisato's browser history as revenge, but he sees a message asking him to make a single wish. The next day, Kazuya arrives at school, and he's shocked that the entire building looks like a telenovela drama, as guys and girls are getting cuddly all over the place. Suddenly, a girl collides with him and lands on the floor, giving him a clear view of her striped plot covers, and a screen appears in front of her, giving him options on how to respond to her. Since time is running out, he swiftly picks the third option, which claims that he didn't see her striped peach protectors, so she smacks him in the face and walks away. When Kazuya arrives in class, he's shocked to see that all the guys and girls have paired up with similar screens in between them. And Shidao tells him about a rumor that says that asking a girl out at the cherry blossom tree that day is guaranteed to make them a couple. As Kazuya takes his seat, Kiriha informs him that an Amasogi has turned their school into a dating simulator, where they have to raise their target's affection to form a romantic relationship. While walking through the hallway, Kiriha informs Kazuya that the game Amasogi is somewhere on school grounds that has a television, and he sees Chisato talking to the dude from earlier. However, when he calls out to her, she coldly tells him that she doesn't know who he is and asks her secret admirer, Hiroshi, to deal with him. Kazuya accuses Hiroshi of using a love potion on her since she rejected him the previous day, but Hiroshi tells him to quit the false accusations and pushes him away. He then accuses Hiroshi of blackmailing her into agreeing to eat his sausage, but Chisato slaps him and calls him a horrible person for being mean to Hiroshi before walking away. While walking after her, Hiroshi tells Kazuya that he now owns Chisato's cookie because no one can beat him in the Pure Hearts game, but this makes Kiriha realize that he's the owner of the Amasogi, so she informs Kazuya. As Hiroshi walks ahead with Chisato, Kazuya chases after him and accuses him of using an Amasogi, but he suddenly summons a squad of 4 ugly girls that beat up Kazuya. While he's on the ground, Kiriha tells him to win Chisato back while she finds the Amasogi and turns the game off, so he returns to his feet. Shortly afterwards, Kazuya explains the situation to Osamu and asks for his help in winning Chisato back, and Osamu assures him that they'll succeed because he's cleared all the characters in the phone version of the game. He then pulls out a board and goes full geek mode while explaining the system of the Pure Hearts game, and he informs Kazuya that the only way for him to make a comeback is by using the free entry option, which involves coming up with the best response possible using his knowledge of Chisato's personality. Hours later, Kazuya meets Chisato by the hallway, but when he calls out to her, she replies to him coldly, which makes him panic, so Osamu explains that he'll need to build a combo by continually rizzing her up. After Osamu leaves, Chisato asks what he wants, and the option screen pops up, but he sees that all the regular options are trash, so he decides to come up with an answer himself. He boldly tells her to help him out with a math problem, and this makes her blush as she agrees to his offer, so he celebrates that her affection levels have gone up. As she tutors him, another response screen appears, but he ditches the options and grabs her hand while telling her she has beautiful hands. However, Chisato coldly tells him to take their study seriously, so Osamu explains that he needs to use the context clues. During lunch, Chisato asks why she's seated with them, and Osamu responds with a line out of DiCaprio's Book of Riz, which makes her blush, so Kazuya scolds him for trying to get the jump on him. As Chisato opens up her lunch, an option screen appears once again, and Kazuya notices that the third option is great, but he decides to come up with something better than that, so he tells her that her lunch reminds him of her natural cakes, which makes her blush once again. She then hands him a piece of egg to try out, and a response screen appears, so he glazes her repeatedly by calling her the perfect wife material until her face starts melting red. When she asks about Kiriha, a response screen doesn't appear, and Osamu starts panicking when he realizes that they're in a free input conversation event, but Kazuya cheerfully responds that she's sleeping in her gym clothes. This makes Chisato angry as she remembers Kiriha sharing a bed with Kazuya, and Osamu informs him that her affection levels have reduced, so Kazuya starts freaking out, but Osamu explains that he can escape this situation with his next response. However, Kazuya's responses make her even angrier, and a pop-up screen appears to inform him that Chisato is about to explode in anger, but before he can refuse the bomb, she blows everything up by calling him an awful degenerate. A while later, Kazuya and Osamu meet in a room with Kiriha, who tells them that she couldn't find the game. Osamu then informs them that the only way left to max out Chisato's affection is to use an NTR combo, which would give him the advantage with a single sentence by leveraging Kazuya's longtime friendship with her. Meanwhile, Hiroshi is about to confess his feelings to Chisato at the cherry blossom tree, but Kazuya suddenly arrives and pulls out some dolls from his bags while asking her to play house with him again. This gives her a flashback of the good old days when they used to play with dolls together, so she snaps out of Hiroshi's spell and cheerfully hugs him, leaving Hiroshi in tears. Afterwards, Kiriha drops them off at the infirmary and leaves to find the Amasogi, so they fall asleep on different beds. However, when Kazuya wakes up, he sees Chisato kissing him and notices that he's tied up on the bed. Suddenly, Chisato exposes her plots and asks him to put his V-card in her envelope, causing him to freak out. Meanwhile, Hiroshi explains to Kiriha and Osamu that he was running the game on a computer in the lab, and Osamu informs Kiriha that the computer version of the Pure Hearts game is rated, so she runs to the infirmary while the boys turn off the game. By the time she arrives, Kazuya and Chisato have already separated and are hiding from each other in embarrassment. A few days later, Kiriha puts Kukure in different wrestling positions while scolding her for wrongly predicting that they wouldn't run into any Amasogi anymore, and she begs Kokuyu to help. But Kokuyu explains that she has to go work to make some money for their shrine repairs. After she leaves, Kukure puts on her mask and tries to clap back at Kiriha with a water impact blast, but only a cup of water drops from the sky. So Kiriha laughs at her and puts her in the walls of Jericho submission, which makes her cry even more. However, Kazuya intervenes by offering Kiriha some pudding in exchange for peace, so she finally lets go of Kukuri, and as Kazuya leaves to buy the pudding, Kiriha asks Kukuri to have a chat with her. She then asks Kukuri why her powers have depleted ever since she assumed this lowly form, but Kukuri says she'll tell her at the right time, so Kiriha decides that she'll force her to speak. However, some brats shatter their sand castle with a beach ball, and the sand splashes all over them, so Kiriha chases the fools around. Afterwards, Kukure is cleaning up Kiriha in that bath, and she asks why she has to do such a task, so Kiriha explains that Kazuya, who normally handles it, couldn't enter the bathroom because she was too shy. Kukuri then notices that Kihara's plots have gotten slightly bigger, so Kihara explains that her spiritual energy is slowly growing thanks to her holder, Kazuya. The two airheads then play an intensely violent game against each other until they both pass out. During dinner, Kazuya eats only half his food because he wants to give the rest to Kihara, but Kasume thinks he's hiding a dog, so she reminds him that there are no pets allowed at home since their dad is allergic. He then notices that Kiriha is casually dining with them at the table and gets so stunned that he drops his food, but Kasume calls her a freeloading spirit, so Kazuya asks how she knows about her. Kasume explains that she's already met with Kasume and his dad since the day she first moved in, and claims that it isn't strange for her to mingle with them, since she's a memento of his mother. When Kazuya asks his dad if he knows Kiriha, the deadbeat says they do, and in fact, they go way back since she's his sister-in-law. During their school days, Kazuya's dad, Kazuaki, tried repeatedly to riz up Kanaka, but Kiriha ruined his plans every time, so he's now terrified of her. As Kiriha enjoys some pudding, Kazuya remembers that he planned to give some to Kukuri as well, so they head to the playground with the pudding, only to see that it's been wrecked. Just then, Kukuri rushes in and hugs Kiriha with tears spilling from her eyes, and Kokuyu explains that their shrine was removed from the playground because it was deemed an environmental hazard after a boy got injured there. Seeing that Kukure is miserable, Kiriha decides to help her find a new place, and they end up taking her and Kokuyu to Kazuya's house. The next morning, Kazuya heads to the bathroom with sleepy eyes, but his face suddenly collides with Kokuyu's bare milk factories, so he jumps away and explains that it was a mistake. However, Kokuyu says it's alright because playing with her fun bags is a bigger prize than the World Cup, and she gives him the green light to fondle them even more. But Kukuri arrives with zero plot covers on and calls him a weirdo. The previous night, Kazuya told Kasume and Kazuaki that he wanted to give Kokuyu and Kukure a place to stay, but Kasume complained that she didn't want her brother to be under the same roof as the mountain-sized plots of Kokuyu. Kazuaki also declined the offer, but Kihara started reading out his browser history, so he agreed to let them stay just to shut her up, and the girls celebrated. In the present, Kiriha drags Kukuri to the Kanara shrine to borrow money for a malison forecast, and Kukuri calls the god of the shrine, Taguri, so she turns the door into a wormhole that drags them inside the living room. When Taguri arrives, they introduce themselves, and Kukuri asks her to borrow some money, but Taguri asks them to play a card game called Concentration first. Kiriha asks how it's connected to their loan, so she explains that she'll loan them the amount printed on the card. Kukure whispers to Kiriha that they have to go all out so they'll get all the cards, and whispers a secret plan which they'd use as a last resort. When the game begins, Kiriha pulls 2 cards which total up to 5,000 yen, but she fumbles her next picks, so Kazuya takes his turn. However, he ends up pulling 2 cards which offer playtime with juicy melons instead of money, so Kiriha crashes out at Kukure until she explains that he can demand the act written on the cards because Tagure is actually a lolicon who created the game to satisfy her weird interests. Hearing this, Kiriha tries to run, but Kukure chases after her and reminds her that they have a chance at winning. Once it's Kukure's turn, she picks a card which offers ear nibbling, so she carefully picks her next card, only to end up with armpit sniffing. However, the female Hisoka ends up picking cards for smooching, so she drains all of Kukuri's brain juice with an intense kiss and pulls another card, which offers a candy stick game, so she seizes the opportunity to devour Kiriha's face as well. As the game progresses, Tagure pulls more freaky cards that allow her to do all sorts of rated roleplays with the girls, and she eventually pulls a card for a full-body massage. So Kiriha asks for directions to the ladies' room. After Taguri gives her directions, she asks her to accompany her, so Taguri takes the bait and immediately drags her to the ladies' room. In her absence, Kukuri rearranges all the cards on that board and assures Kazuya that they'll win, but when Taguri returns, she immediately notices that the cards have been moved. Kukare tries to deny it, but Tagure reminds her that she's the goddess of metal, who has memorized all the slightest blemishes on the playing cards, and to prove her point, she decides that they'd stay the night if the next card she pulls is a full-body massage. However, she ends up pulling an entirely different card, and Kiriha pulls the full-body massage card, so she realizes that Kukure wiped the fingerprints off the cards they moved. As the girls celebrate, Taguri rains on their parade by reminding them that it's against the rules to touch the cards when it isn't their turn, and she punishes them by forcing them to roleplay Rugrats before sending them off. A few days later, Kiriha is watching a trashy rom-com show on television, and Kizuaki shows up behind her, hoping to convince her to let him watch baseball, but she gives him a bombastic side-eye, which scares him away. However, Kasumi suddenly arrives and turns off the TV, so Kiriha tries to pounce on her, but she shows the lazy dimwit that Kukuri is busy washing the dishes. Kiriha still doesn't care, but when Kasume threatens to cut off her pudding supply, she starts begging, so Kasume tells her to peel some potatoes. Kasumi then notices that they're out of soy sauce, so she calls Kazuya downstairs to buy some, and the girls offer to go with him since they're done with their tasks. At the convenience store, the pea-brained Lolas start drooling over all the sweets on the shelf, so Kazuya stops them from picking them, and explains that he can't buy any sweets because he was only asked to buy the items listed. Like a good girl, Kukure helps him get all the items on the list, but she sees a married couple in the corner, which makes her brain drift into Delulu land as she imagines a world where Kazuya is her husband. However, Kiriha interrupts by dumping the entire pack of pudding she picked in front of them, but Kazuya keeps them back on the counter, so she starts singing tearfully about how much she wants to eat pudding. After watching her performance, Kazuya decides to buy a cup of pudding for her out of pity, so she celebrates as they move ahead. However, Kukuri is drawn to a red bean-flavored version of the pudding, but she can't tell Kazuya about it since he's far away with Kiriha, so she starts daydreaming again until Kiriha calls her. As they stand in line, all the gooners in front of them start gawking at the majestic milk bags of the salesgirl, and it turns out to be Kokuyu, so Kukuri approaches her to have a chat. When they return home, they enjoy dinner along with the rest of the family, and afterwards, Kiriha gleefully runs off to enjoy her cup of pudding. As she does, Kukuri watches her in sadness, but Kazuya proves to be the ultimate gigachad as he hands her the dessert she was craving at the convenience store. Apparently, Kasumi added it as one of the items on the list she gave Kazuya for the trip to reward Kukure for her hard work, so Kukure enjoys her snack alongside Kiriha. The next morning, Kazuya arrives at school, and he's shocked to see that all the baddies in class are treating Shiru like a prince, but the other losers in the class are angry as they ask him how he went from being a risless bum to Mandingo overnight. Shiru starts teasing the girls, so the anti-goon police, Chisato, storms in and tells them all to stop their freaky behavior. But the girls tell her to go find her own eggplant to feast on, before continuing their love play with Shiru. Seeing this, Osamu concludes that Shiru's random popularity with girls is a supernatural phenomenon, and Kiriha suddenly appears to explain that an Amasogi is the one behind it. Kazuya reminds her that she's meant to stay hidden from the class, but she crushes his tiny marbles once again and explains that she expected this attack because of a forecast which Kukuri told her sometime earlier. She then tells him that it's the perfect time for him to perform his role as a Malison cleanser, but when he asks what to do, she tells him to figure it out himself. He then accuses Shiru of using a fake tool to make all their class girls crave his love bone and advises him to destroy it, and Shiru tries to deny those accusations, but he gets so nervous that he accidentally reveals that he used a love cologne. Hearing this, all the boys in class get ticked off and chase him like hungry zombies to get the love cologne, but he holds it away from them. However, Kazuya knocks him and the other gooners out with an obi attack, but the class boys respawn like Elden Ring monsters, so Kiriha explains that the desire that summoned the Amasogi resonates too strongly with them. As they charge at Shiru, Kazuya wraps him with his obi and runs away with him, but the zombie boys chase them, so Kazuya uses Shiru's body as a battering ram to knock them out. However, they run into a second wave of Gooner zombies in front of them, so Osamu leads them upstairs into an empty classroom. As they hide there, some zombie boys break in through the window, so Kiriha knocks them out with obi combos. Soon after, they have Shiru all tied up, and they ask him to explain everything, so he narrates how he was rejected by a girl, who explained that girls prefer guys who have eyes for them alone instead of desperate simps like him. After she left, Shiru started crashing out about how the cheap love cologne he bought from Temu failed him, and he left the perfume on the table. But the Amasogi awakened in the cologne and asked him to use it again. In the present, Kazuya explains to Shiru that he has to destroy the Amasogi himself so that he won't suffer from malice and atonement, which causes bad things to happen, and he agrees, so Osamu unties him. After they hand it to him, Shiru tries to smash it on the ground, but it bounces and spills all over Kazuya, causing all the girls in the city to chase after him. When he arrives home, he enters the bath to relax, and he decides to make Shiru destroy the cologne properly the next day since they failed earlier. Just then, Kasume shows up and asks to join him, and he thinks she's joking, but she appears at the door like a hungry cougar and walks into the tub. To make matters worse, Kukori and Kokuyu arrive, and since they're also charmed by the love cologne, they enter the pool and smother him with their plots. As he struggles to think of a way out, Kiriha and Chisato also arrive and join them in playing freaky games with his love stick in the tub. After making him spill his gravy 3 times in a row, the girls play a game of rock, paper, scissors to determine who would get the first bounce on his joystick. But Kazuya finally manages to break the cologne and free them from its spell. The next day, everyone in class keeps their distance from Shiru because his malice and atonement has him smelling like rotten eggs for a whole week. Several days later, Kazuya and Kukure are practicing together, and she fires a barrage of water balls at him, but he successfully blocks with his obi shield, so Kiriha instructs him to reweave the obi for an attack. However, the moron ends up tangling up the obi, and by the time he's done untangling it, Kukuri already has him at blade point. Since Kazuya lost so miserably, Kiriha beats him senseless and sits on him while scolding him for taking too long to reweave. Kukari defends him, saying he can't become a master overnight, but Kiriha tells her to shut up and commands him to do 100 weaving drills as punishment. The next day, Kazuya is lying exhausted in class, and Osamu asks why he's looking like a used toilet rag, so he explains that Kiriha is training him brutally all day, but Chisato tells him not to sleep in class. Just then, Taka uses the school radio to summon all 3 of them to the student council room, and Kazuya immediately gets a bad feeling. When they reach the door, they hear a loud bang inside, so they rush in, thinking that Taka has ended his miserable life with a grenade, but they see him on the ground, rocking Saitama's hairstyle. After putting his wig back on, he nonchalantly tries to start a conversation, but Kazuya scolds him for leaving them confused. So Kiriha explains that Taka's hair fell out due to malice and atonement, since she was the one who destroyed his Amasogi instead of him. Hearing this, Chisato assumes that she'd have also gone bald if they defeated her Amasogi for her, and she starts freaking out. But Kiriha tells her not to jump to conclusions and explains that the atonement depends on the nature and power level of the Amasogi. Since everyone is now up to speed, Taka informs them that a dead girl named Eiko has been appearing to students of Class 5 when they're alone and demanding something from them. He then asks them to investigate it, and Kiriha explains that Eiko's presence is caused by an Amasogi since ghosts don't exist, so Osamu suggests asking people around about her. After gathering up some information about Eiko from the students around, Taka suggests talking to a girl named Nanako from the newspaper club that's been investigating Eiko for a while, and they see her trying to question a girl, but the girl slams the door in her face. When they approach her, Nanako starts geeking out about how exciting it is to have a ghost story at school, but the girl she was interrogating, Kosakabe, suddenly starts freaking out and shows them that Eiko has appeared. Eiko asks Kosakabe for a letter, but Kiriha tells Kazuya to capture her, so he throws his obi at her, but she blocks it with her hair. As she charges towards him, Kazuya activates his shield, but she leaps over it, so he attempts to punch her down, only for Eiko to ignore him and run away. Later, they all assemble at the nurse's office, where Kiriha reveals that the Amasogi possessing Eiko is called a kamioni, and it's a dangerous foe born from regrets that linger in the hair of dead people. She then informs them that the real host of the kamioni is a living human whose wishes resonate with the deceased's regrets, meaning that the person would suffer malice and atonement if they forcefully exercise it. Since Kosakabe heard their entire conversation, Kiriha asks her to spill any information she can give, so she narrates how she, Eiko, and some other girls used to fawn over a particular boy named Yuichi together, leading to the formation of a fan club between them. However, Yuichi started showing interest in Eiko, and things got awkward in the fan club, so Kosakabe left, But the other girls started bullying Eiko, and they were led by a girl named Muratsuki, who ended up being the first person to find Eiko's corpse. After hearing this story, Taka writes down the names of all the girls from the fan club since they're important witnesses in the case, and Chisato presumes that they'll be visited by the Amasogi soon, but Kazuya informs her that Nanako is looking into it. Just then, Taka's secretary arrives and informs him that Eiko's sister enrolled in their school, but she goes by a different last name since their parents got divorced. Once they see the name, they all rush to the yard, where Kazuya weaves his obi into a pair of wheels, which drive him ahead. Somewhere in the street, the ghost of Eiko is choking out Muratsuki with her hair while asking her about a letter, but Kazuya suddenly arrives and saves her by cutting off the hair. He then calls out Nanako, because she's the actual sister of Eiko, so she comes out of her hiding spot and commends him for figuring things out. When he asks for her motive, she explains that she just wanted to know why her sister took her own life. Back then, she placed a lock of her sister's hair on a piece of paper, but an Amasogi manifested from her wishes and made her Eiko appear as a ghost, so she decided to use it to find out the truth. Hearing this, Kiriha explains to Kazuya that there's another link between the two sisters' regrets, because Eiko herself didn't wish to know why she died. When Kazuya asks about the letter, Nanako explains that it's the only thing the mindless version of her sister has said on her own, and then asks Muratsuki for more information about the letter, since she knew it was a seppuku note. Muratsuki explains that Eiko and Yuichi were meant to end up together since they loved each other, but out of consideration for the other fan club members, Eiko started avoiding him, so they started bullying her to make her leave the club and start her relationship with him. Nanako claims that her sister unalived herself because she couldn't take the bullying anymore, but Muratsuki says she's wrong and reveals that Eiko scolded them for all the bullying that day, and she was going to tell Nanako how she felt as well. However, Muratsuki saw her walking alone to the school roof, and after following her, she found only her shoes and a seppuku note after Eiko unalived herself. In the note, Eiko tells Nanako about how a dark spirit suddenly appeared on her body and started telling people her dark thoughts. Eventually, the dark spirit said that Nanako needed to die, so Eiko leapt without a parachute to save her sister. Hearing this, Nanako breaks down in tears, but the dark spirit takes control of Eiko's body, so Kazuya attacks with his obi. However, the Kamioni blocks and sends him flying, so Kiriha explains that its power has been boosted by Nanako's wish for death, and the Kamioni transforms into a hairy version of the attack titan. As the Kamioni approaches, Kazuya starts throwing powerful obi attacks, but the Kamioni destroys his moves easily with its hair and starts overwhelming him with punches, so he creates an opening with punches of his own, before destroying the spirit with a drill attack. Kiriha then explains to Nanako that Eiko's love for her was stronger than anything else she felt, and advises her not to wish for death anymore because it would make Eiko's sacrifice worthless. In a shrine somewhere, a flame goddess named Honoka blasts a girl named Su Nao with a powerful flame attack, but Su Nao survives, so Honoka accepts her as a malison cleanser, which makes Su Nao's partner, Kotetsu, happy. As Su Nao prepares to leave, Honoka asks if she's having second thoughts about going to Kamioka because she could just deal with the malison in their area, but Su Nao says she's sure, so Honoka waves her goodbye as she walks away. Meanwhile, Kazuya explains everything that happened with Nanako and Eiko to the others, but Nanako suddenly arrives and tells them that she can't talk anymore due to her malison atonement. Kazuya apologizes for destroying the Kamioni, but she explains that it's her own responsibility, and Kiriha boldly claims that it's Nanako's fault before walking away. After school, Kazuya is preparing to go home, but Su Nao suddenly appears and starts beating the sonic coins out of him until Kiriha appears and blocks her attack. When she charges in for another attack, Kiriha overwhelms her with kicks, and Su Nao tries to land a kick of her own, but Kiriha catches her leg and slams her face first on the ground. As Kiriha tries to lock in a submission, Su Nao kicks her away, and Kiriha lands another kick on Su Nao's face, but Su Nao tanks it and slams her on a table. Kazuya rushes in to check on her, but Su Nao punches him to the ground and calls him a pathetic excuse for a malison cleanser. As Su Nao moves in to finish him off, Kiriha throws her obi to support him, but Kotetsu suddenly appears and rips the obi to shreds with her blades. Su now scolds Kotetsu for disobeying her by getting involved, and Kotetsu tries to explain But Sue now claims that a tool has no right to talk back and commands Kotetsu to go back to her original form. Kotetsu transforms into a sword, and Kiriha is surprised that the sword Tsugumomo hasn't taken over Sue now. So Sue now explains that she's not fragile enough to lose her willpower to a spirit. She then reveals that she's there to test their skill and claims that Kazuya is not fit to represent Kanaka, but Kazuya has no idea who Kanaka is. So Sue now informs him that it's his mother. As she walks away, Kiriha asks where she's going, but she asks Kiriha and Kazuya to follow her because she's going to report what happened to the local god. Shortly after, they arrive at Kukurei's shrine, and Kukurei tries to aura farm despite being pocket-sized, so Kiriha bullies her until she passes out. While staring at Kazuya, Sue now remembers watching him as he destroyed the hair monster earlier, and back then, she wondered why an ugly clown was using Kanaka's obi. When she asked Kukuri about it, Kukuri delivered the unfortunate news that Kanaka has passed away, and her obi is now being wielded by Kazuya as a malison cleanser. So she asked Kukuri for permission to test his strength. Back in the present, Sue now explains this to everyone, and Kukuri adds that she filled her in on everything they've been up to recently. But Sue now offers to take Kazuya's place because she's determined that they aren't suitable to fill the role of the region's malison cleanser. She then challenges Kazuya to a duel, causing everyone to freak out. Years ago, Sue Nao's brother died, and Sue Nao was so devastated that she begged Honoeka to lend her a powerful Tsukumagami so she could take revenge on her brother's murderer. But Honoeka angrily reminded her that she stood no chance since they're dealing with a foe that even her brother, Suo, couldn't beat. Honoeka then reminded her that the reason her brother took on the burden of a malison cleanser and ended up dying is that he wanted her to live a normal life, and she advised her to honor her brother's wishes, but Sue now disappeared mid-speech. In another room, Kotetsu was crying over the fact that she was too weak to protect Suo, but Sue now suddenly sent her flying with a Detroit smash and told her that she was going to use her because she needed her on her vengeance quest, even though she was weak. Kotetsu eventually guided her to the spirit that unalived her brother, but when she arrived there, she saw Kanaka one-shotting it. She was angry that someone else had destroyed the spirit that unalived Suo, so she charged at Kanaka, but Kiriha knocked her out before she could attack and started bullying Kotetsu. After she explained her motive to them, Kiriha called her an idiot for attempting to defeat something so powerful, but Kanaka was so moved by her sob story that she started crying. However, Sue now declared that Kanaka was now the object of her vendetta, and this confused them, so she ranted about how she wanted to help her brother find peace by taking vengeance on someone. Hearing this, Kanaka agreed to be the object of her revenge, and after that, Sue now challenged Kanaka many times and enrolled in a malison cleanser school to sharpen her skills even more. But when she returned, she saw that Kanaka was dead, and a loser had taken her place. After narrating this, Sue now explained that she doesn't see Kazuya as someone worthy of following in Kanaka's footsteps because Kanaka was her master whom she admired, and she declared that she'd become Kanaka's replacement by defeating him. So Kiriha asked Kazuya to accept her challenge. The next day, Kiriha tried to get Kazuya to start training, but he refused and claimed that the world would be better off without him because so many people are already suffering due to the fact that he attracts malison. Kiriha reminds him that he decided to take responsibility for the malison he attracts, but he says he wants to hide away in his room while Sue now takes over the role. So Kiriha angrily storms into his sheets and hugs him. When he asks why she's hugging him with zero plot covers, she says it puts him at ease, but he starts whining about how everyone, including Kiriha, sees him as a pain to be around. So she snaps him back to his senses by crushing his infinity stones and tells him she'll always stand by him no matter what happens. With her face glowing red, she tells him not to wish himself dead because she'd be lonely if he were gone. So Kazuya smiles and promises her that he'd do his best as a malison cleanser. Suddenly, Kiriha transforms back into her adult form and reminds him that Sue now showed him all her attacks and gave him a week to prepare for their duel. She admits that they have the upper hand in strength, but Kazuya decides that he won't give up, so Kiriha cheerfully promises to eat his eggplant if he wins. Just then, Kasumi and Kukuri arrive and see them in one of your favorite positions, so they scold Kiriha for trying to steal Kazuya's V-card. During training, Kiriha reminds Kazuya of the range of his obi, but she claims that Sue now has a much better advantage because of her Getsuga Tensho attacks, and also points out that they're a bad match since a sword Sugumomo can perfectly tear through her obi. Hearing this, Chisato and the others conclude that they're cooked, but Kiriha assures her that they have a plan. Meanwhile, Su now is moving like Samurai Jack during her training with Honoka, and Honoka tries to deliver a powerful kick, but she stops it with the handle of her blade, making Honoka praise her skills. Afterwards, Su now thanks Honoka for sparring with her, but she says she doesn't mind because it helped her burn some calories. Honoka then asks what her chances are, and she assures her that there's absolutely zero chance that she'd lose because she's already seen that Kazuya and Kiriha are bigger frauds than Megumi in combat, and she's already seen all of their obi techniques during her sparring sessions with Kanaka. However, Kotetsu advises her not to underestimate Kazuya because even though he pales in comparison to his mom, he still passed the test to become a Malison cleanser. Su now explains that she could easily bypass the defense of Kazuya's obi with her sword and claims that she doesn't need a tool to give her opinions, so Kotetsu apologizes. That evening, Kazuya and Kiriha are chilling together in the bath, and she suddenly grabs him from behind while reminding him of how Kukuri gave them some water dolls to use for their duels, which would absorb all the damage during their duel and stop them from dying. Kiriha explains that the dolls only prevent the fighters from dying, which means that she and Kotetsu can be damaged. However, they also have projections, and Kiriha's projections aren't as strong as her real self, but they can be regenerated as long as she has spiritual power. The real obi is also capable of recovery, but it consumes spiritual power, which limits Kazuya's maneuverability, and she warns him to be careful when choosing which obi to use, but also tells him not to hesitate to use the real obi. While drying her hair, Kazuya expresses his worries that Kiriha will get hurt if the real obi is damaged, and he promises to win the duel and protect her because she's important to him, but this makes her embarrassed, so she crushes his marbles again while scolding him. Later that night, Kazuya meets Kanaka in the dream world, and he complains about how brutal Kiriha is to him, so she explains that Kiriha has a habit of protecting people, and he took her breath away by being the one offering to protect her. She then plays all the freaky things he's been doing with the girls, and gives him advice on the best ways to make Kiriha's kitten turn into the Pacific Ocean. Kazuya admits that he likes how things are at the moment because he gets to hang out with all his homegirls, and he fears that things might change if something happens, but the dawn arrives, so she starts to leave. However, Kazuya's two brain cells start functioning for the first time, as he slowly realizes that Kanaka is his mother, but she tells him not to bother trying to connect the dots because that part of his memory has been sealed away, and promises him that she'll be waiting for him when he remembers. Later that morning, Kazuya and Su now smear some of their blood on the water crystals, and Kokori informs them that all damage they take will now affect the doll instead since the contract has been sealed. She then explains that their water doll will break if they leave the grounds of the duel or forfeit, and she announces that the duel is to determine the Malison cleanser of Kamioka under her supervision. Su now is annoyed that she's been training her whole life to become a Malison cleanser and carry her brother's legacy, while a bum like Kazuya became one just because Kiriha forced him. She considers him an enemy and decides that she'll destroy him no matter what, and Kotetsu decides that she wouldn't lose no matter what because she knows she'd get blamed again if she does. Meanwhile, Kazuya realizes that he's the one causing problems for others with his Malison attraction curse, but he decides that he'll keep being a Malison cleanser to solve everything, and he doesn't want to lose to someone like Su now, who treats a Sugumomo like a tool instead of a partner. Once the duel begins, Kazuya creates a dummy, which attacks Suunao, but she destroys it easily, so he grabs her sword, but she launches him away. However, he creates another obi dummy, so she splits it in half with a long-range slash, but the obi dummy suddenly punches her, causing her water doll to crack. Just then, Honoka appears in the size of a doll and sits on Kukuri's head while telling her that Kazuya is proving himself to be a great rival for Suunao, and Kukuri agrees with her. Suunao then destroys another dummy with her slash, and Kazuya tries to sucker punch her again, but she blocks, so he creates a large ball in the air with his obi. Kotetsu warns Suunao to move back, but she tells her to shut up, and suddenly, Kazuya's obi ball transforms into a large sledgehammer, which sends her flying to the ground. The goddesses are surprised that the battle is so one-sided in Kazuya's favor, and Kotetsu advises Suunao to strategize before her next attack. but she ignores her and decides to charge ahead with full force instead. Kazuya then attacks with a drill weave, but Sue now blocks and fires a sword slash, which Kazuya blocks with his shield, and Kazuya continues overwhelming her with obi attacks. After blocking his flurry of attacks, Sue now fires another slash attack, so Kazuya blocks with a shield and throws an obi at her, but she shockingly fires another slash, which nails him in the chest. As Kazuya tries to run away, she blasts him with a more powerful version of her slash, and after blocking, he jumps into the bush, where he fires some rocks at her with an obi crossbow. After blocking the attacks, she slashes his hiding spot, so he jumps away to protect himself, but she overwhelms him with slash attacks and eventually injures Kiriha. To make matters worse, one of Kazuya's projections vanishes, and Kiriha explains that the recovery is draining her spiritual energy, but Sue now attacks again, so he jumps away. While he's in the ground, Sue now jumps in to finish him off, and he considers using Kiriha, but he doesn't want her to get hurt, so he uses the projections to form a watershed, which blocks Sue Nao's slash. Sue Nao is shocked that her ultimate attack was blocked with a mere obi, but Kazuya delivers a double obi punch, which pushes her back and makes her crystal crack even more. Surprisingly, Sue Nao starts running away, and Kazuya thinks she's retreating. But Kiriha explains that she's only making room to catch her breath and tells him not to give her a chance, so he chases after her. However, Sue Nao launches a slash attack at Kazuya, but he blocks with a hand weave and throws an obi at her, but she slashes it in half, only to realize that it was just a projection. As Kazuya attacks with another obi, Sue Nao counters with a powerful slash, which nabs him in the chest, and they both enter a stalemate. Kiriha informs Kazuya that they can only block attacks but not strike back because they only have 2 obi at their disposal at the moment, and she suggests that being on the defensive is best. On the other hand, Lady Ichigo realizes that she can't use any more long-range attacks, and she knows Kazuya won't attack since it would put him in danger, so her only hope is to get within sword's range. However, she's worried that closing in on him would lead to her loss because her crystal can't take any more damage, and Honoka tells Kukuri that the duel is already over because the obi has been recovering slowly during their stare down, and once it gets to 3 obi again, it's game over. Kukuri brings up the fact that Sue Nao could withstand her big flame attack, so Honoka explains that she managed to pull it off using an overpowered technique, which can only be used at close range, but she says it's no use because Sue Nao won't be able to get them to close in. However, Kazuya tells Kiriha that he doesn't want to stay on the defensive because he aims to beat Sue Nao at her best to make her understand that Sugimomo aren't just tools, so she agrees, and they cheerfully charge towards Sue Nao, which shocks her. Sue Nao takes up a stance to unleash her Bankai named Winged Cutter, but Kazuya perfectly fuses with Kiriha using a technique called Divine Possession, and when Sue Nao launches her strike, he reinforces his arms by wrapping them with obi, allowing him to block the attack. The two Ultracads engage in a heated back and forth with their overpowered strikes, while the goddesses watch in shock, but Kazuya eventually disarms Sue Nao by breaking Kotetsu's handle and delivers a powerful blow to her gut, which shatters her crystal into pieces. Kukure cheerfully declares Kazuya the winner, so Kiriha appears and slaps his peaches as a reward. As they celebrate, Sue Nao checks on Kotetsu, and Honoka explains to her that they lost the match because she spent too much of her spiritual energy in spamming attacks without caring about the accumulated damage to Kotetsu. However, she assures her that Kotetsu will be fine since she's a one-piece blade, and asks her to show gratitude to Kazuya for not snapping her in half, even though he had the chance to. Shortly afterwards, Sue Nao carries a patched-up Kotetsu as she leaves, and Kazuya is confused because he thought she only saw Tsugumomo as tools, but Kiriha explains that no one who really thinks that could show the power she did. As Kukuri and Kiriha argue with each other, Kazuya suddenly collapses from exhaustion, which makes them panic. Later that evening, Kazuya is resting on the bed, and Kiriha explains to Kukuri that Kazuya's collapse is the after effect of the divine possession, because even though it grants the user inhuman strength, it also puts a huge strain on their body. Kukuri says it was dangerous to use that technique because if it wore off before they defeated Kazuya, Kiriha would have had to protect an immobile Kazuya while fighting, but Kiriha explains that she wouldn't have gone that far because she was already low on energy at that point. She reveals that it's the first time they use that technique seriously, but she didn't think the backlash would be this severe, and Kukuri reminds her that they can't use that technique whenever they want since it's a move they have to be sure they can win with. However, Kasumi interrupts by calling them for dinner, and Kukuri feeds Kazuya his food since he can't eat by himself. So Kiriha teases her and suggests that she help Kazuya with more than just eating. Soon after, Kiriha asks her to help Kazuya take a bath, but she complains that her brain would get fried when she sees his sausage. So Kiriha makes him wear a tiny cloth to cover his package and a blindfold to stop him from seeing their plots. She then hands Kikuro a sponge, so Kukuri scrubs his back while Kiriha rests his head on her natural cushions, and Kazuya tells Kukuri to stop if she's uncomfortable, but she says she's happy to do it as a reward for his hard work. However, Kiriha turns him around and asks her to wash his love bone, so she takes off his towel and sees that his 7-inch machine is in battle mode, so she scrubs hard until he spills his gravy. Afterwards, Kukuri falls asleep, so Kiriha climbs on top of Kazuya and takes off all of Kazuya's plot covers before feasting on his remaining white sauce. The next morning, Kukuri lifts their sheets, and she freaks out when she sees that they're lying on top of each other with no plot armors on. So Kiriha ties her up with an obi while they explain to her, but Kasume storms in to scold them all. Hours later, Kazuya leaves for school, and the girls discuss their plans to do something crazy for Kazuya that night. Meanwhile, at the Sumiraji temple, Sunao's mom scolds her for damaging Kotetsu in an unnecessary duel, which she lost, and she then informs her that there are 2 ways for her to inherit the temple. The first is to defeat the one who bested her, and the second is to marry Kazuya, which makes Sunao freak out. At the same time, Kazuya arrives at school, and his friends inform him that there's a transfer student coming to their class. When the teacher arrives, she calls in the new classmate, so Kiriha walks in, wearing a school uniform, and cheerfully introduces herself to the class, causing them to cheer loudly. Seeing this, Kazuya remembers the day she first appeared, so he welcomes her with a warm smile. That's it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed and watch this video on screen.